Mason and his family were out on their usual fishing trip when something happened that none of them could have imagined. Someone had tied a rock to a poor dog and tossed it into the river. What followed left them completely stunned. They had just gotten to the riverside for their monthly outing, expecting a peaceful, fun time together. Everyone was setting up their gear when suddenly Mason's son, Charlie, let out a loud scream. Mason froze. That sound triggered every protective instinct he had. He rushed over to his son, expecting the worst, maybe a twisted ankle or a bad fall. Charlie was known for taking tumbles, but when he got to him, Mason saw that Charlie was crying loudly, yet seemed totally fine physically. He and his wife both let out a breath of relief. Still, they were confused. Why had Charlie screamed like that if he wasn't hurt? They asked what happened, but Charlie was sobbing so hard they couldn't make out a single word. That's when he pointed to the river. Mason turned, and what he saw hit him right in the chest. There was a dog in the water, clearly struggling to stay afloat. It was panting hard and kicking with everything it had. The river wasn't wild or deep, and most dogs could swim through it easily. So why was this one fighting so desperately just to keep its nose above water? Mason stepped closer to the edge, and then he saw it. The dog's collar was tied to a heavy stone, which had sunk to the bottom. The poor animal was being pulled down by it. Even though it fought to stay up, its movements were slowing, like it was running out of energy. A wave of anger washed over Mason. Who would do something this cruel? Who could look at a living creature and decide to throw it in a river tied to a rock? But then that fury quickly turned to fear. If no one helped right now, the dog would drown. Mason looked around. There wasn't another person in sight, just his wife and kids. Little Charlie was crying and trying to squirm free from his mom's arms, wanting to jump in and help. But there was no way Mason would risk one of his kids' lives, not even for a dog. That left one option. Mason would have to go in himself. He looked at the river. It wasn't deep. He could probably walk most of the way to the dog. He had his pocket knife, and it would take just a few seconds to cut the rope. The whole thing might only take a minute or two. He knew he could do it. His body was strong enough. But for some reason, his legs weren't moving. His body wasn't listening. Mason stood there frozen, feeling like life was playing a cruel joke on him. Why was this happening, right now and right in front of his kids? Sweat formed on his forehead as he forced himself to take a step toward the river. His family watched, confused. They knew this man. He wasn't someone who would ever just stand by while an innocent animal suffered. So why wasn't he moving faster? But as Mason looked at the trembling dog fighting to stay above water, a different image started to form in his mind. Another dog, just as helpless. That dog was drowning too, and Mason hadn't been able to save it. His name was Gus. Mason had gotten him for his 5th birthday, and from that day on, they were best friends. They played together, ate together, and never left each other's side. Mason thought they'd be together for many more years, but life had other plans. One afternoon, Mason's family decided to spend the day at the local beach. Little Mason begged his parents to let Gus come along. At first, they were hesitant. It was shark season, and the waves were rough that day. If they went, both boy and dog would have to stay far from the water. Mason promised he'd hold on to Gus's leash and never let go. After a bit more convincing, his parents agreed. That day, Mason couldn't have been happier. But then everything changed. While they played on the sand, Mason spotted a shiny seashell. He reached down to grab it, and in that 1 second, the leash slipped out of his hand. That was all it took. Excited, Gus bolted straight toward the water. He thought it was just like home when the sprinklers came on, something fun to chase and splash in. He had no idea the ocean could be dangerous. Mason ran after him, and his parents rushed behind, calling his name. They knew their son would follow that dog no matter what, and they were terrified he'd put himself at risk. Gus splashed through the shallow waves, barking and wagging his tail. But suddenly, a strong tidal wave rolled in. It swept the little dog off his paws and dragged him into the deeper water. Mason chased after him, heart pounding. He was just about to dive in to save his best friend. Just as Mason was about to leap into the water to save Gus, a strong hand grabbed him from behind. It was his dad. He yanked Mason back and placed him quickly into his mom's arms. She stepped away from the shoreline, clutching her son tightly, while Mason's dad ran into the waves, heading toward the dog. But before he could get far, a piercing scream stopped him in his tracks. Mason's mom had spotted something terrifying, several dark fins cutting through the water, and they were headed fast toward the beach. Sharks. Mason's dad froze, torn between fear and heartbreak. There was no way he could make it to Gus now. The dog had already been pulled too far out, and the danger was too great. It was the worst day of Mason's life. On the ride home, he cried uncontrollably. His best friend was gone, just like that. His parents did their best to comfort him, but nothing helped. Mason was heartbroken, and to make things worse, news of what happened spread quickly around town and at school. He felt not only crushed by the loss, but also angry that no one else at the beach had tried to help. All he could think about was how he wished things had turned out differently, how he wished he still had his pup. A little while later, Mason asked his parents if he could take swimming lessons over the summer. They said yes right away, glad to see their son taking a step forward. But for Mason, those lessons weren't just about having fun. He had a reason. Deep down, he believed that if he had known how to swim that day, maybe Gus would still be alive. That goal pushed him. His focus turned into passion, and it didn't take long before Mason started loving the water. He joined the swim team in high school and competed in several events, building both skill and confidence. Eventually, he became a lifeguard at the same beach where he had lost Gus. He worked hard every school break, determined to protect others. It was during those lifeguard shifts that he met Betha, who later became his wife. Life settled down for a while, but no matter how much time passed, he never forgot Gus. Every now and then, he'd think about that little dog, and how he never wanted anyone else to feel the pain he had carried for so long. Now, standing at the edge of the river, Mason felt that same crushing fear return. For a moment, he wasn't the strong, experienced lifeguard. He was just a little boy again, helpless, watching his best friend slip away. And then he looked at Charlie. His son was screaming, just like Mason had once screamed to his own father. Mason couldn't let this happen again. He couldn't let Charlie grow up feeling like his dad didn't do everything he could. He just needed to push past that fear. It took a few moments, but finally, something inside him shifted. Without another thought, Mason threw himself into the river and swam straight toward the dog. He refused to stand by and watch the past repeat itself. When he reached the pup, the poor thing was moments from slipping under completely. It could barely keep its head up and was just about to go under. But Mason didn't waste a second. He reached out, grabbed the dog by the scruff, and lifted its head above the water. "Breathe!" he yelled. The dog let out a weak whimper and opened its eyes. It was exhausted, but alive. Mason quickly pulled his knife from his pocket and sliced through the rope tied to the stone. It snapped easily under the blade, and the dog gave a small, relieved bark, finally free. But she was far too tired to swim back on her own. So Mason did what he had to do. He held on tight and dragged her back toward shore. They both landed on the riverbank with a soft thud. Betha ran straight to Mason, checking him all over in a panic to make sure he wasn't hurt. By now, Charlie had stopped crying and was staring at his dad in pure amazement. He had just saved a drowning dog with his own hands. But they weren't out of the woods yet. The little pup was shivering hard and still in bad shape. Betha grabbed a blanket and gently wrapped it around her. The family packed up their gear, not even thinking about the fishing trip anymore. What mattered now was getting this dog to safety. They rushed to the nearest vet clinic. Dr. Shelby welcomed them as soon as they arrived. He was shocked as Mason and Betha explained what had happened by the river. The dog, still trembling, was gently placed on the exam table. She'd been in the water too long. Dr. Shelby wrapped her in more warm blankets to help bring her body temperature up before starting the full checkup. When she finally stopped shaking, he began the examination. They learned that the dog was female and had a name tag on her collar, Shay. Dr. Shelby found that one of her legs was broken and her body was covered in small cuts and bruises. He assured the family that he would do a full exam to check for any other injuries, just to be sure. Given how serious the situation was, the vet urged Mason to report it right away. Whoever had done this to Shay needed to be found and held accountable. While the vet worked, the family sat in the waiting area trying to process everything. Mason couldn't stop thinking about Gus. Seeing Shay struggle in the water had brought back all those old feelings: loss, guilt, anger. But now there was something more, a quiet but strong resolve. He was going to make sure Shay got better, and that no other animal would go through something like this if he could help it. From that day forward, Mason made it part of his routine to visit the clinic every evening after work. He sat by Shay's side, speaking softly to her, letting her know she wasn't alone. And as the days passed, she began to heal, slowly but surely, right in front of his eyes. Along with visiting Shay every day, Mason followed Dr. Shelby's advice and filed a full report with the authorities. He shared every detail he could remember, from the exact spot where they'd found her to the strange way she'd been tied to that rock. The officers assured him they would launch a full investigation. As time passed, Mason became more involved in Shay's healing. He started helping with her physical therapy, learning from the clinic staff how to guide her through gentle exercises to rebuild her strength. His connection with the dog deepened with every visit. There was something about her spirit, the way she kept trying despite the pain, that really struck Mason. The more time he spent with her, the more he knew. He didn't want this to be temporary. He couldn't picture sending Shay back to a shelter once she recovered. After talking it over with Betha and the kids, Mason made up his mind. He wanted to adopt Shay and give her a real home, one filled with safety, comfort, and love. It felt right. He told the clinic staff about his decision, and they were thrilled. Everyone there had grown attached to Shay, but they knew deep down that she deserved a family, not just a clinic room. They helped Mason with the adoption paperwork, making sure everything was ready so Shay could start her new life officially. And when that day finally came, Mason and his family welcomed her home with open arms. Shay settled in like she'd always belonged. Her playful energy lit up the house, and her affectionate little nudges brought laughter back into their days. She reminded Mason so much of Gus, not just in the way she looked at him with those trusting eyes, but in the quiet, loyal way she stayed close by. For the first time in years, Mason felt like a part of his heart that had been missing was finally whole again. Meanwhile, the investigation into Shay's case started gaining traction. The authorities followed leads, talked to people near the river, and pieced together what had happened. Mason stayed in close contact with the officers, ready to help however he could. He wanted justice, not just for Shay, but for any other animals who had suffered in silence. Then came the news no one expected. While tracking down the people responsible for Shay's abuse, the investigators stumbled onto something far worse, a hidden operation involved in illegal dog breeding. The police acted quickly and raided the suspected property. What they found left everyone stunned. Dozens of cages lined up in rows. Some dogs were skinny and sick, others far too old to be bred again. It was a heartbreaking scene no one would ever forget. The conditions at the facility were heartbreaking: filthy cages, barely any food, and no sign of the love or care every animal deserves. As investigators dug deeper, the truth behind the whole operation came out. Those responsible admitted that any dog too old or sick to breed was simply thrown away. Some were put down, others sold off with no concern for where they'd end up. In the worst cases, the animals were used in illegal dog fights or races, treated like disposable tools for money and entertainment. Shay, with her broken leg, had no value to them, so they chose the fastest, coldest way to get rid of her. The news left people across the community horrified. For Mason, who had fought so hard to save her, it hit especially hard. He felt a heavy mix of grief and anger. Just thinking about how close Shay had come to that fate made his heart ache, and his resolve grow even stronger. It was a painful reminder of the cruelty that sometimes hides just beneath the surface. But it was also a moment that lit a spark. Shay's story traveled fast. People were outraged, but also moved to act. Her rescue stirred up something powerful, a shared drive to put an end to illegal breeding and to stand up for the voiceless. The people behind the operation tried to defend themselves, saying what they did wasn't any worse than what vets do in clinics. But no one bought that excuse. The law stepped in quickly. They were arrested and charged with multiple crimes: illegal breeding, trafficking, and animal cruelty. For Mason, though, this was just the beginning. Shay had shown him what resilience looked like, and he wasn't going to let her down. Even after bringing her home, he stayed deeply involved, helping every rescued dog from that facility find a second chance. He worked with local shelters and rescue groups, helping them match each dog with a safe, loving home. In his heart, he knew this was more than just about Shay. This was his chance to make peace with the past, to make up for the helplessness he felt when he lost Gus, and he wasn't going to waste it. Now, with Shay by his side and his family behind him, Mason had a new mission: to make sure no other dog went through what she had. He'd carry this purpose forward, for every scared pup he met, for Shay, and for the little boy he used to be. What a shocking journey. Do you think Mason did the right thing by involving the authorities? Could more have been done to save Gus back then? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life animal rescues just like this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it with someone who may find it interesting. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.